Finals time, and now we get our rematch, our consistent rematch throughout the Western Age. Method v Method NA versus EU onto this one, and it's sure to be another fun matchup. And, you know, and maybe it'll be one of the closer matchups that we'll see today that'll also have a lot more cleanliness to it, because we've had some cleaner matches maybe early on. But so far, we've had so much slapfest in like these lower brackets that it just seems like we haven't had our tight teams, our tight connections just yet.
Yeah, that's the lower bracket though, you know? So,
that's true.
But yeah, it started a bit sloppy for sure. We did see, honestly, I think when I was watching the last series in the back, I think No Girls Allowed actually played quite cleanly. Of course, as Titles mentioned, there could be some route optimizations, but you'd expect that from the two teams coming up. You're going to see some pretty spectacular play. However, both Method teams have had a bit of slip up here and there. It seems to be becoming norm. You'll have a wipe once in a while on the dungeons between these two teams. Once in a while, I'd agree on that one. Twitch chat certainly has got the favor for Method EU onto this one, but we can't count NA out as we're getting started with game number 1 in Atal'Dazar, by the way, which Method NA was dominating on in that time trial run, number 1 so far. Number 1, and you know what, Jack? One of these two teams is going to win this match. Woo! Method and EU right off the bat, straight up to the Western Terrace here towards Priestess Alunza. I mean, typical start to the dungeon. We see this all the time. No Bloodlust commitment because I'm assuming they're going to use their Bloodlust coming up for Priestess Alunza with a massive pull in front of the boss. Now, if I recall correctly, last time we saw Method EU do this, which was 2 weeks ago, Gingy went downstairs to try and grab that pack from the bottom of the stairs and then died on the way because of the fire. So I wonder if they're going to try to repeat that strategy when they get there.
Yeah, I assume they're going to do it again because something like that, I mean, he just used his cloak too early, right? That was just a player mistake. Now, Sally actually having some trouble here as one of the casts went through that spawns those circles on the ground, those swirlies, the fire swirlies. And Sally has to stand on his ledge to be able to prevent the Juggernauts from charging. So it doesn't actually have a lot of room to dodge out of that. So a lot of damage on her group. As you can see, Sally doing 70k HPS. But that was really just because some interrupts didn't go through of the team.
Yeah, no, a bit of sloppy play there. Mastered coming in on the side of Method NA from JB as they run right up the stairs past the Construct right now and head over into Priestess Alunza's room. So typical play from both teams right now. Method NA slightly ahead, honestly just because of that small slip up. So it put a bit of stress on Method EU, but no casualties on either side. Here comes the big pull right now for Method NA and Method EU following suit. Both Bloodlust popped on either side right now. They are DPSing everything on Priestess Alunza's stairs, making sure to keep that Enchanted Emissary out of the pack and trying not to let the Juggernaut get too many charges in.
Yeah, we're going to see some insane pulls. You can see Sally actually dropping really low. The quaking, it's just because he has a disease. Mare is actually going down. They do have one battle rest available, but Sally is struggling so much, and disease cannot be dispelled because Maris was dead this whole time. Now he finally got a global to rest him back up, but Maris does not have the blood debuff from the pools on the floor, so the boss actually healing a little bit off of Maris here, at least not getting the damage from all 5 players. So definitely a little bit of a mistake here, costing them quite a bit. You can see that HP difference between Method NA and Method EU on the boss, 10% now, just because of this Maris death.
Yeah, a bit of shaky start here for Method EU right now. We did have Shakib just proc his cheat death, but he is on the rogue this time, so won't have the same woes as Shakib Drunk had yesterday on his Unholy DK. Managed just to stay alive right now. Yoda ticking down as well as we get another, or the second transfusion, probably the penultimate transfusion cast from Priestess Alunza. The Honor Guards and of course the Augurs have been pulled from downstairs that we were mentioning earlier. On Method NA side and on Method EU side. Weird, they have the exact same strategy. How peculiar at the same time in the fight. So everything was pulled from downstairs, this time not with the major pack though, so it seems that they've kind of split it into 2 to play it a bit safer. Really no major loss doing this as long as they're able to control it. The Emissary of Tides certainly having no significant impact on the boss anyways. Final transfusion coming in here for Method NA as they head down the stairs and prepare to move across the bridge, likely jumping down into Razan's pit. Method EU just a bit slow here, does finish off the boss now, a few seconds behind Method NA though. And they have that one death too. And
Gingy actually proccing his cheat death while he was getting that pack again. So thankfully, thankfully he had a cheat death available because I believe he got hit by the fire again when he pulled those. But yeah, Method EU a little bit behind, as you mentioned. And in the time trials, both of those teams were really close. 3 seconds between them. Method NA got first place though. So they are the ones who have the faster strategy in theory. It's only 3 seconds. But I remember them you know, talking back and forth on Twitter because Method EU had this really fast Atal'Dazar strategy, and Method NA had the really fast Atal strategy. So they were just saying that they constantly just have to try to beat each other, and just so insane how fast both of those teams are. As Method NA is jumping down, fighting Rizan already, Method EU following suit, but just a little bit behind.
Just a little bit behind here. We already saw the bleed on Rizan here hits like a Tonka truck. Rizan in Tyrannical, especially on an 18, and well, obviously even higher, actually does a pretty substantial amount of damage. You can see both tanks respecting that Nerf, rotating his personal CDs every time that bleed debuff comes up. That not only chunks you hard, but puts an armor debuff on you as well. So he's already rotated through his shield wall and his last stand. I believe JB still has Bark Skin available, so wouldn't be shocked to see that played next. Not sure why they didn't start with the Bark Skin so that it's back up by now, but nonetheless, that doesn't matter. Rizan 60% now, and Rizan 80% for Method EU. Both teams sitting at similar trash, 48% for Method NA, 46% for Method EU, but of course Method EU have the Emissary on top of the boss there, so pretty equivalent percent. Nerf dropping so low there, and no Bark Skin being used by JB, so that was a pretty dangerous right there.
Hey, that's the quaking, really. I mean, on top of having the bleed from the boss, which does do a lot of damage, the Rizan bleed, and then just having unfortunate quaking timings can definitely cause some trouble on bosses. We can see a random death occur if you have some boss ability overlap with quaking, so you definitely want to watch out for that in the future. Nerf just barely surviving there. Method EU now also getting this Emissary of Tides on top of the boss, so they're really just mirroring the strategy. They're just running the exact same strat. Method NA just doing it slightly faster. And Nerf dropping so low again.
I don't know why they're not using their Barks yet. It's the only super dangerous thing in this fight for a tank.
Iron Bark is used.
Oh, it's his Iron Bark. I'm going insane, man. It's his iron, but it wasn't on CD there either. It's right next to it, right? It's that white hand icon.
No, it's below. It's next to the Mass Root at the bottom. Left to Master.
Oh.
It's hard to see when it's grayed out.
Yeah,
really
I have to lean in really hard to see that. Okay. Okay, I was going inside. I was like, why is he not using his Barks? And then I remembered it was Iron Bark. Apparently I had too many pretzels during the break. Rizan here, 12% and 39% for Method EU. Nerf tank with one last bleed in the fight. You know, it's really interesting, speaking of the tank bleed, just to see the stability over on Method EU side. Now did not have shield wall to rotate through any of his CDs. It just came up now. I'm not sure if he's going to commit to it, but now never really, even with a quaking overlap that you were mentioning, now never even dropped below like 70-60% HP. Nerf yo-yoed twice and almost fell over. So just a bit more attention paid to Xellia, or at least paid from Xellia, or at least more, you know, kind of premeditated attention, knowing that that damage was coming in.
Yeah, we see Method NA already down with Rizan. They're on their way to do this next pull. We've seen some very interesting strats in Atal come out of Method NA as they did these huge snapping pulls, which is something we're probably going to see right here. You can see Yoda just off to the side, pulling the middle pack on top of Nerf with tricks to the trade. Now, this snapping, we've talked about it many times. If you go on a specific position where the mobs can't reach you, they will just teleport on top of you, and this is what they're making use of here. Just so efficient, especially in Atal'Dazar, just because it's such an open dungeon, everything is so spread out. So if you have the tricks of the trade on the tank, and you can just have multiple packs be pulled on top of one spot, just very efficient.
The only problem with this pull here is the Dynamancer that they pull on top of it is a ranged mob that is not interruptible. Outside of her Dynamancer buff, but outside of that, she just shoots a bow or a gun. So you can't really grip her or do anything to her once she's there. So when you jump off, you actually run a pretty high risk on her specifically of having her evade bug. We actually saw that on one of the teams yesterday. Fortunately, it did work out for them, but she just sat there for 5 seconds. It was a pretty close call. Method NA probably knows this, so it looks like they're opting to just finish her off there, not risk jumping back onto the main platform before they finish that mob off. And she goes down right now. Kisho has been killed. They're probably just going to finish everything here. There's no reason not to. It localizes all of the explosives. Quaking is a bit dangerous, but the rogues sit on the edge anyways. And then there's no Sanguine to play either. So looks like they're just going to clean everything up nice and easy. Method EU, the same thing here. They're falling behind a trash percentage a bit. They're doing the exact same pull here, but Method NA has pulled even further ahead now.
Yeah, and Method NA, first they were snapping the middle pull on top, and then once they had it a little bit lower, they were actually snapping even more on top. We saw Shakib just run off in the middle of the pull and just getting some more Sky Screamers on top. So very well done. They got a lot of percentage from this very specific middle pull. They are 81% already. Method EU still trying to finish off this middle pack, as Method NA already onto the next area here. They also pulled the 2 Stalkers. Okay, yes, so this is a very, very common pull we see a lot with the Stalkers and the Witch Doctors. Lots of things that we need to interrupt here.
Yeah, lots of things that we need to interrupt, but this is not going to be the remaining 19% that they need for the dungeon.
No.
In fact, I don't even know if it's enough to put them to that 97, 98% required for only 1 remaining Sky Screamer. So we'll see exactly what it puts them to. There's 6 mobs in here. They each give just slightly over 2%. I believe they're all equivalent. So Method NA should be in the mid-ish 90s to high 90s. So yeah, it'll be about 93. Okay, so actually even lower 90s. So they'll have a bit to deal with after the boss here. 7% worth of trash. Method EU dealing the exact same pull. I believe they'll actually be at 95% once they're done with this. Vol'kaal has been engaged here for Method NA. Neither team has Bloodlust available because they popped it at the same time on Alunza and likely will be using it again on Yasma, the final boss of the dungeon when they get there. First phase, we of course know the reanimation totems have to all be killed at the same time. Now, Vol'kaal, like Alunza, Niguruio's mentioned, were 2 bosses that were honestly a bit of a snooze fest, but they were buffed in 8.2 to be a lot more dangerous.
Yeah, so they do more damage now, especially Vol'kaal. He also does a little bit less damage to himself, so it takes a little bit longer. And we also have, we saw Zali actually proccing this stuff, so that's probably something he didn't want to do. I'm not completely sure if he just dropped too low or something definitely happened here. Not sure what. JB still has the stuff available to him. And I mean, look at Method NA. They have such a clean run so far. They're so incredibly fast. I mean, both of those teams are playing the same strategy, and the strategy is definitely already insane in itself. But to be able to execute it this properly and just having 0 deaths, just very good job by Method NA. They even have, they have all the battle rests available. They have all the safety nets still to them. They will have the Bloodlust as well for Yasma. So they have some safety nets in case something goes wrong. But Method E is really close behind, so they don't really want to make any mistakes.
Yeah, certainly both teams are out to play today here. That one death, though, it might, I mean, they're already slightly behind, but the extra death with 5 seconds with how well and clean Method NA is playing right now might just be the final nail in the coffin for Method EU on this map. Vol'kaal now down to 60% for Method NA and 85% for Method EU as both teams just move around the edge, getting all their damage in as much as they can. The healers trying to output as much damage. We know they're both very offensive players, at least as much as they can, so they've used any externals. This time they did use the Iron Bark, as we heard. Listen, all right, I'm allowed one brain fart once in a while. Give me a break.
Twitch chat disagrees.
Twitch chat always disagrees, though. Method EU, 63% versus 34% on Method NA. And I mean, there's, as long as they stay away from the gate when the boss dies here, as we all know, because those gates fall down right away. You don't want to proximity aggro the rest of the mobs. They do have 2 rogues, and you can mass stealth out. This boss, yeah, it hits harder, but nothing else really mechanically is developed for it. You just still kind of move around in a circular or triangular pattern around the room until it's dead.
Yeah, so we actually saw one team use the Bloodlust here to the surprise of Saronic. He was not happy about that one because, we mentioned before that this boss just slowly kills itself. So Bloodlust not the best usage here. Maybe it was a safety kind of thing because of the buff and the boss doing more damage, but it should not be a problem for those healers to heal. You can see JB and Sally both still doing approximately 15k DPS to the boss while still keeping the whole group alive. So it should be fine. As Method NA finished off the boss, no problems there. They're gonna skip this trash again. So again, they have 7% trash left that they have to do. A little bit less than Method EU. A little bit more than Method EU, sorry. So not sure what exactly they will pull. Probably pull something on top of the last boss because their time times is 14:45. So they only have 2 minutes 45 left, which the last boss is probably gonna make up.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Pull what, right? The Emissary of the Tides is here, and I believe that's about 2-ish%. They still need 2 more mobs about in there. Yeah, Sky Screamer, but they need 2 Sky Screamers, right? And they pull the Emissary of the Tides. Why would they pull a Sky Screamer and Emissary of the Tides? Method EU has 95%, so they likely need 2 mobs from somewhere. Zalia's run over. He started the RP, and he's immediately gotten back in stag form. As we can see now running off, he does pull one of the Sky Screamers, 2 of the Sky Screamers. So there's the remaining 2 mobs that Method EU needs. Hopefully somebody watches them so they interrupt for the fear. Method NA has an Emissary of the Tides, and they're just missing 2 mobs. I don't think I saw them pull anything. They might have pulled the 2 Sky Screamers as well. Nonetheless, they are halfway through their Bloodlust here on Yasma right now, cleaving down that Emissary of the Tides. Method EU following suit, pulling the boss, and immediately popping their Bloodlust as well.
Yeah, I assume there has to be a Sky Screamer somewhere. Maybe that's why JB is running Mastered. I'm not completely sure. In theory, they could be seeing 2 of them because one of them can be hibernated and the other one can be paralyzed from from Lighty. So there's definitely the possibilities to see them. But Method EU, they have one Sky Screamer already. They're cleaving it down with the boss, so they already have one. That does not make up 5% either, though. So they definitely need something else as well on top of this. As if you look at the damage, Method NA obviously pulling the boss quite a bit faster than Method EU, so therefore they are 10% ahead damage-wise. Look at the damage meters. I mean, still pretty even. Of course, the Sky Screamer will boost their damage a little bit on Method EU stats because of the cleave.
Yeah, I mean, they killed one last Sky Screamer. Method EU here, they're still missing one mob's worth, whether it's, you know, an Augur or a Sky Screamer. They did still have the double Sky Screamer, one on each perch in the middle area. I'm not sure where it is. I'm not sure if they used a longer crowd control on it, like a Paralyze, and then it's going to just join the fight a bit later or something. I guess we'll see in a moment. Hopefully they didn't miscount their percent. I doubt that they would, seeing how fast these two teams have run. Method NA with the 95%, about to be 97 from that Screamer on the side. Yeah, and then we can see the second Screamer in the corner on Method NA. Okay, so they did actually pull both Screamers. I think Method EU has their second one crowd controlled in the corner as well, if I saw it properly. So they did indeed pull both Sky Screamers. I just didn't see who did it on Method NA. I suppose it was off camera. So percentage is accounted for. 8% difference between the two bosses in favor of Method NA, and of course that one death. So once again, barring any unforeseen circumstances, Method NA should be taking this one.
Yeah, I mean, look at the time. Look at how crazy these teams are and how fast they are. I mean, this is an Atal'Dazar on Tyrannical on a plus 18, and they're going to be finishing this dungeon in less than 15 minutes approximately. So just insane speed by both of those teams. Not completely sure. It seems like Method EU actually did not pull the last Sky Screamer. We saw an observer view there. There was a Sky Screamer with a cross marker. They probably forgot to pull it or it reset somehow. But, I mean, in the end, even if they had the Sky Screamer there, they still would have lost because Method NA just has a complete perfect run. And they're still slower than they were in time trials. So they had an even faster run in the time trials.
I mean, that's weird. Like, you could see Xaylia running off desperately now trying to grab it. I could have sworn I saw now weapon throw both of those Sky Screamers when they were in the middle of the room. So it is totally possible they just reset for whatever reason. But that wouldn't have mattered because Method NA with a pretty much perfect run here, Jack.
Very strong run by Method NA. I think what happened was, as far as I remember, Naguri, you're not able to mount up onto another druid if you're in combat yourself.
Yeah.
So I think now ended up pulling it, and I think he was trying to get aggro onto one of the rogues who was sprinting. Make sure that he gets aggro, then he shadow melds, mounts up on Xaylia, and then runs up the stairs. Something along those lines.
Maybe, yeah. That's possible.
I did see him throw, and then immediately started hopping onto Xaylia, and I didn't think that you could do it if you were in combat.
Yeah,
so
no,
pretty sure that's what ended up happening, but Tettles, great run here by Method NA.
Dude, we were talking in the back. I feel like this dungeon is just pretty much as optimized as you can be on an 18, just with how quickly both of these teams are running it. They pull all of the trash into Priestess Lunza, which is a very, very daunting task for both teams, but they do it expertly. And then they do this like triple or this double Sard pack snap with the Dynamancer pack that also has Sards in it. That's a very dangerous pull as well. Just having just the sheer amount of tank damage that causes is insane. Method NA, just a little bit cleaner of a run. They have like one less death, and then the weird shenanigans with the Sky Screamer that you actually saw at the end for Method EU ended up costing them the match. Method NA, though, has a great run and really is showing why they can actually compete versus Method EU.
That's right, and being able to go through the time trial maps as well. I mean, we'd mentioned previously here, Sloot, that wasn't even their best run. That wasn't even really their fastest run onto that. So there's even more potential that these guys really have.
Yeah, I mean, there's more potential, but, you know, there's obviously a factor of RNG here. You know, how many buffs are the rogues getting with their rolls? You know, all these factors can line up. You know, a mob accidentally getting CC'd out in the open. So, you know, the average of many pulls, I'm sure, probably lies somewhere above what their best time was and obviously below some of their worst times. And this just happened to be one of the better ones, but it was in between. But, I mean, it's a tough run to beat when you perform that well as Method NA. And even if, I mean, we saw, or the proof is in the pudding, essentially, right? Yeah. We saw even if Method EU didn't have the death, I mean, they still would have lost. So then they misplayed the Sky Screamer at the end. Even without that misplay, they still were just slower to defeat the dungeon. But this is also not the first time we've seen Method NA beat Method EU in one of the best of 3 series.
As I was going to say, yep.
And then Method EU still reverse sweeps, always. So
Method NA is really going to have to buckle down. They have to make sure that they're playing their own game because we're going into King's Rest after this short break. Game 2 on the other side of it. Welcome back as we're getting ourselves ready for game number 2. Method NA has won the first round in Atal'Dazar, but Method EU feels right at home in King's Rest with their time trial time 2 minutes faster than anybody else. This is going to be a tough task for Method NA, but I can't wait to get into it.
I can't wait either, and this is going to be an interesting one. Everybody's been so curious.
Yeah.
What did Method EU do to get such a vastly superior time in time trials in this dungeon compared to the other team? And I guess we're about to see here as both teams mass stealth right out the gate and head straight into the Golden Serpent's room.
Yeah, I really noticed one thing. Is Sally actually playing Tree of Life? Something very special in this dungeon because we don't see that often at all. So they probably do some insane pull where you need this Tree of Life. I was just talking to Teddles before the game started. I was like, oh, they probably don't even do an insane pull. They probably just play more efficient to make up those 2 minutes difference between the first and the second seed, which is Method EU and Method NA. But with Tree of Life, maybe they do something insane.
Interesting combination that both tanks are playing Night Elf as well instead of Dwarf to counter some of the bleeds from the Berserkers on the bridge. So that might tie into some of the skipping required later on. But we've already started in the first room, and disaster striking early for Method NA as Nerf Tank goes down. Immediately, the Ring of Peace goes down as well, just to support his res. He immediately gets up, but can only taunt one mob. Reset it with a heroic leap and taunt again. Shakib going down for Method NA. It's impossible to get aggro and everything. So much damage coming in on Nerf. He has the dot from the Whirlwind Tornadoes going on too, and he starts to kite across the map. Mass Root comes in defensively from JB to try and help stagger the damage coming in on Nerf Tank right now. It looks like they're kind of starting to stabilize, but they're missing a DPS for the entirety of this Bloodlust Burst, Nagura. Not a good start for them.
Yeah, and it's not even the damage as well, but the interrupts, right? That's why they're struggling so much to finish off this pull, just because there's so many Witch Doctors on top that need to be constantly interrupted. You have to definitely chill. That's a huge amount of burst damage to the tank. Frost damage, I believe, any sort of magic damage that the tanks have a lot of trouble to deal with. And then on top of that, you also need to interrupt the Shadow Bolt volley. So as soon as you're missing one rogue, one of those interrupt people, you actually struggle a lot more. But they did manage to finish it off here, but it's kind of cost them so much time. Not only do they have 2 deaths, which just mean 10 seconds on top of their timer, but they also need to have the rest here going up. And if you play against a team like Method EU that is playing so well, then this is definitely going to mean something at the end.
Yeah, we can see the Emissary of Tides already crowd controlled in the corner. So far, we haven't really seen anything too crazy just yet. Both teams doing the same thing. A big pull. Reanimated Guardian pull actually for Method NA. This we haven't seen. Usually we see the pairs of Guardians either during the Gauntlet or during the first boss. So the aggressive pull with the last pack in the room. I don't hate this. I'm certainly not mad at this at all. But now we see now running up and grabbing the Guardians as well in preparation for the Golden Serpent, which is spawning and RPing or role-playing around the room right now, combined also with the Emissary of Tides. This as well we've seen. So really nothing too new coming out of Method EU just yet. It's got to be something to do with the bridge or Machimba later in the dungeon. Method EU still cleaving down the first pack along with those first 2 constructs as Method EU has gotten started on the first boss, who sits at 88%.
So we actually saw now cast Declare Edict, which is something you've been talking about, right? He changed his trinket from, I believe, from magic to physical, because magic was needed for those Witch Doctors with the Frost, with the Deathly Chill, and now he wants the physical again for those 2 Guardians that do a lot of damage. We've seen some teams try this pull before, where they put the Guardians on top of the Golden Serpent, but we just saw the tank dying over and over because of the amount of damage they do. And they also enrage when they reach below 35%, I believe, 50. Or 50, and it's not dispellable. So Sally cannot soothe this enrage off. They just do more damage, they have more haste, and they attack faster.
Yeah, so you can see they're not even bothering with the animated golds on the side. They're using a combination of Ursula's Vortex and, well, really whatever else they can in order to just kind of mass root them. You can see Zalia's mass root on that little golden blob in the corner, or in the bottom of the screen rather, for Method EU right now as they cleave down the remaining Guardians. 40% on Method's EU Golden Serpent, as Method NA is now at 65%. Is not cleaving anything on top of it except for just the one Emissary of the Tides, which has become kind of the standard comp here for this season right now. Master coming in from JB as well on the side of Method NA. So both teams playing a very similar tactic of just ignoring these golds. We can see one of the golds was blinded over on the side of Method EU, so they just don't have to deal with it at all until Azalea can get in there and start CCing them yet again.
You can see just how low now dropped there before they casted their last Suppression Slam. Actually something the tanks want the Guardians to cast, because whenever they cast a Suppression Slam, the frontal cast, they don't melee attack, right? So they have a little bit of a breathing room where they don't get attacked by the animated Guardians, but they finally managed to get them down on Method U's side. So only the boss left. Method NA, of course, also killed those Guardians earlier with one of the trash packs, so they both have 28%. Now the only difference will be if one of those teams actually chooses to pull the other two Guardians that they skipped at the very start on top of this Gauntlet.
Yeah, I mean, we have... I'm not... The danger with that pull is, well, we saw it perform properly yesterday. But what happens is you do pull the small minions of Zul with it.
Yeah.
So you do have to have a... And it looks like they're actually going to do it. So the minions of Zul likely are going to come with it unless they found a way not to pull it. But yeah, there we go. So
oh, that's where they're playing Mass Root.
exactly.
Oh,
so Mass Root
yeah.
comes in for these minions of Zul. And we can see the pull in here for the animated Guardians already. Obviously, on top of it, he has now pulled the emissary of the Void Emissary on the side, which just started casting. You can see it in the corner there. But we know what they're going to do, at least based on some of the strategies yesterday. I believe it was 40k that did this. They're going to keep those small minions rooted in the hallway, cleave the two constructs on top of the pack, and then everybody is going to shadow meld off the rest of the smallies, which explains exactly why the two Prot Warriors are running a shadow meld from a Night Elf.
Yeah, so very nicely done, this strategy by Method U, Method NA. I mean, we've seen it by 40k, but they struggled a lot more with this kind of strategy yesterday, as they had a bunch of wipes or full team wipes come in. Now you see the fixate on both those teams, this purple fixate icon on the group frames, that is from the minions of Zul, which they will shadow meld off earlier, as Sloot just mentioned. You can see them be mastered there in the back on Method U's side. Now, those animated Guardians, they did get changed. So the Suppression Slam, the frontal cast, it stuns you if you get hit by it, only targets the tank, so it's definitely a lot. Oh, JB actually going down for Method NA.
Not what you want to see here. They don't have a battle res, but JB, because they cleared all of the trash on the way in, immediately releases. But yeah, indeed, their Mass Entangle is not available now, so they're doing what they can to get rid of them. ROP goes down, Ring of Peace, of course. Cheever's going in. The rest of the team is desperately trying to run away from them as they cave them and get them in the corner. Lighty gets feared. All these mobs run in and wreak chaos everywhere. Nerf tank going down, Lighty going down, and this is going to be a full team wipe on the side of Method NA because JB died. JB, the two Resto Druids are the key to the strategy. You need to have Mass Roots constantly up on those ads. You can have them up 100% of the time, and that's going to be all she wrote for Method NA with a full team wipe in the Gauntlet. Method EU still going strong here, killing the two animated Guardians on top of the third of 4 pieces of the Gauntlet right now. Did their constructs reset too, or did they kill them? I don't know.
I think they reset as well.
Oh,
that's
man.
A huge mistake by Method NA. I mean, I'm not completely sure if the Rogues did not have their cloak available, but they could have, you know, once JB died, they could have said, you know what, I'm going to cloak, I'm running in, and I'm just going to kill them off, because that's something you can do too, right? You do not need an Arcane Torrent or a Master Spell to kill them. You can just damage through the Absorb Shield, which we've seen in the past as well that those Rogues are doing. So maybe they just didn't have the cloak ready, or they didn't think about it when it happened. But yeah, just all going down there without that Master available. Method U, on the other hand, they still have the minions of Zul. As you can see, the fixed icon still just being mastered there by Celia, and they're on their way to activate the last trash group of this Gauntlet.
Yeah, they're just waiting for it to spawn right now. She hits particularly hard. We know that already. Now making sure that he's the closest proximity target to her, as she will get her first shot off on the closest person. You can't grab aggro fast enough before she starts a shoot cast. So the tank always needs to make sure that they are the closest to the queen here. Skeletal Raptor will jump around and do his frontal cleave. No problem for that. It's completely displaceable. There we see it with an Ursul's Vortex being gripped. You can also obviously ROP or Ring of Peace bump it by one of the Windwalkers just to make sure you keep it on top of Queen Patla in order to cleave everything down efficiently. Method NA back in action here on top of the Gauntlet is the second of 4 pieces of the Gauntlet. That's where they wipe. The constructs are back in play as well right now. This is going to be really tough. It's going to be a big, daunting task for them to try and catch up with Method EU. And, you know, Nagura, we still haven't seen.
Yeah.
What is the big secret for Method EU? But as we head into, I mean, I can think of maybe a couple of guesses. Maybe in Machimba's room, they somehow pull everything with the boss and survive. I mean, I don't know. We're going to have to see here. But so far, Method EU hasn't done anything we haven't seen. Everything they've done has been more efficient versus Season 2. We've seen it from other teams. They're doing it very well right now, but nothing too crazy just yet.
Yeah, so we see them do the Shadow Melt skip. Now they still did not Shadow Melt off the aggro. Okay, now they did it, so now they're gonna get rid of the aggro of the minions of Soul. Fragments is Dwarf, so he does not have Shadow Melt. He did vanish instead. Now we'll see what they do here as they gather up the Emissary of Tides, some of the fluids here, and both of the constructs. So they're pulling the whole room. We'll see how they handle the bursting here.
Yeah, the bursting is going to be nasty. It's going to be up to the Rogues to finish it off. They're likely going to drop a Ring of Peace at the last second with Mirrors, and the 3 people who cannot immune the bursting off are just going to run to the opposite side of the room to try and survive. The 2 Emissaries of Tides are dead already. They're going to have to make sure they do a really good job to kill all the blobs at the same time, so none of them leak to the group. Here they go. They're getting low right now. Now is getting ready, likely to Heroic Leap out in just a second. Leg Sweep is down. The 3 of them get out of the group, and the Rogues are responsible for cleaning up the rest of the blobs, which they do well. Cloak of Shadows is popped from both Rogues, and they've completely ignored all of the bursting from all those Ooey Gooey Rich and Chewies. Double Construct pack here on the side, which I likely assume they're going to snowball into Machimba momentarily.
Yeah, that was very cleanly done. That's definitely a very dangerous pull, because if you move too late or too early when it comes to outranging the bursting, you're just gonna die, right? Sally does not have an immunity, Maris does not have an immunity, so if they somehow get all of those bursting stacks on them, they're just gonna be dead, and it's gonna be a huge wipe for them, because Sally and Maris, they're the ones who can rest. So if they both go down, they have to release, and it's gonna just cost them a lot of time. So well done by them, very well executed, as they now engage Machimba as well on top of those 2 constructs that they have left.
On top of the constructs, so they should get up to about 73-74% trash, something like that, after these 2 constructs are dead, which, once again, not to keep spoiling, but we've seen this percentage already from 40k earlier. We saw the strategy. There's the 73% indeed. Typically, if you only pull one of the constructs, I think you end up with 66%. That's usually the percentage that we see on a Machimba. Bloodlust indeed, coming up just to try and chew through this fortified boss's health. That's an interesting one. However, what were their time trials? I believe it was 22.
Yeah.
So that means they might have access to Bloodlust at the very end of the dungeon, which is why they popped it here. So probably from an efficiency perspective, they popped this just to get that extra Bloodlust in on King Dazar at the end. Method NA doing the similarly large full room pull here on the right side, on the small side of the screen right now, as they back up near one of the tombs, making sure that they break their buddies out immediately from one of those entomb casts. So we'll have to keep an eye on if they're able to pull off the exact same quality of pull that Method EU did, who is now sitting at 30% on Machimba.
Yeah, so I think the most surprising thing by Method U is probably going to be the bridge element, right? We've seen lots of teams do different kind of strategies for the bridge, and we've seen lots of teams also struggle on those bridge trash packs. Lots of teams wipe on it, lots of teams have big mistakes, so there must be something very special, very efficient that Method EU does to get past that area. We will see what happens as they're about to finish off the Machimba here, but Method NA, again, up until this point, they did the exact same thing. Of course, they are slower because of the 8 deaths and this huge wipe that they had in the Gauntlet, but outside of that, they're doing the exact same strategy.
That's weird.
Weird, right?
Yeah, it's weird, and they have the exact same strategy as well. Running up the stairs, Method EU now rounds the corner, so once again, so they don't even deal with the first pack here, so immediate mass stealth coming in from, who used that one? That was Gingy, so we still have Fragrance's mass stealth available, but it looks like they're actually getting ready for a big pull in the middle Okay, so we have the Beastmaster in here. They're skipping that front pack consisting of 2 Hex Priests and the Berserker, and they're just actually kind of eating the pack in the middle of the room right now. We do have we see the Berserker, the Brute, excuse me, in the background there. Somebody distracted it so it doesn't patrol into them. So they're looking to try and finish off this pack completely before the Brute even gets there.
Yeah, so the Brute is the one thing we've been talking about, just because it's so inefficient, has so much HP, it has this huge area of denial, making all the trash around it way more difficult to deal with, because all of a sudden you have to run away, then you can't interrupt the other casters anymore, and so on. So that's why this Brute was the biggest concern that we had when it came to this pack, but they just avoided. Mirror's actually going down because of the bleed. He's not a dwarf, so he doesn't have the racial available, right?
That was a bit of a misplay. I mean, now ended up intercepting to Zalia, who's across well out of melee range of the Berserker, because now did not want to get another bleed reapplication from the Berserker. In that case, Jimmy or Fragnance should have been the closest person in order to pop off his stone skin, but he didn't. Mirrors was the one that ended up eating the bleed from the Berserker instead, and I mean, poor Windwalker. Poor Mirrors.
That twice.
Poor Mirrors.
Poor Green Row.
So he goes down. He goes down actually twice on that pull, if I'm not mistaken. They do get him up, and fortunately they're able to rectify and save everything before the Brute enters the room. Here comes the second Mass Stealth coming in for Fragnes, but they missed the skip. So,
Shadow Meld?
Well, now dies on the way in. There's just way too many mobs. Zayla is going to be able to get out of this, as is Gingy. Mirrors does not have his Shadow Meld, but he does not get in combat. So it was just now that accidentally clipped one of the mobs on the side, and good heads-up play for him to just go off to the side and die immediately before proxying any extra aggro on the rest of his group.
Yeah, so definitely some smaller mistakes now here by Method EU. This is why we keep talking about this bridge pack and how difficult it is. Even with Method EU just having such a clean run until then, just making some mistakes here. Now, we see the boss being pulled and a Berserker being dragged on top of it, which is something we've seen from No Girls Allowed right before this game. So we don't see that many dwarves here though, so we only have Fragments who can get rid of the bleed, so this is going to be a little bit more difficult for Method U here just because of the limited amount of stone skins that they have available to them.
Yeah, so I was thinking earlier maybe that's why Fragments didn't use the stone skin, so he has it here, but there's no way it wouldn't have been up. It's a 2-minute cooldown.
Yeah.
That happened a fair bit ago, but maybe that's why they played it safe. They didn't know how fast they'd get to this boss exactly, so Fragments saved his stone skin. Unfortunately cost Mirrors' life twice over in that previous pack. 3 deaths on the board now for Method EU versus Method NA's 8. Method NA going for a bit of a different strategy. They actually went around the room that Method EU DPS'd in right on top of the bridge pack and did a double pull after the Brute had already patrolled away. So we saw this strat. I believe this is more of a 40k pathing here from Method NA that we're seeing right now versus Method EU.
We actually see a Hex go off here on this priest because Nerf was jumping into it and breaking the CC, and then a Hex cast went off. But it's a curse, so it can be dispelled by JB. They are able to recover. But yeah, actually seeing some difference now in the strategies. Up until this point, everything was the complete same. And then this bridge area, this is the area where teams are just struggling in and they don't really know exactly how to play it properly. But Method EU, they showed that they only did one pull yet. So for now, so they definitely have to do more because the Shadow of Soul, which you have to kill before you can get to the last boss, only gives 4%, and they're only on 84, so they definitely need to do some more trash right after this boss. But it makes sense to do the boss first, just to get the checkpoint in case something does go wrong, because you actually respawn here once this boss is dead.
Yeah, so Method EU 84%. As you mentioned, they still have 12% trash left before they have any consideration of just going to Shadow of Zool, which will give the last 4% of the dungeon. Method NA 82% trash with a pretty substantial pull here as Nerf gets thrown out. No, he heroic leaps out of the group and runs back in and just gets absolutely, he almost got globaled there. So much damage coming in, and he didn't have anything active for that. He only got a spell reflect back up. Now, immediately we get the battle res coming out of JB, but once again, it's going to be hard to secure aggro on everything. You can see Yoda chunking down in health. Tranquility's already been used for JB, who is on the brunt end of one of the Frost Shocks from the Witch Doctor right now. Tries to back up. Undulating Tides is already proc for him. Not going to have that available again for another 40 seconds or so. It looks like they've mostly stabilized, but a double bleed stack on Nerf again, and he goes down. They don't have a battle res this time. Shakib doing what he can to stay alive, but he procs his cheat death, and it's not going to be long before likely the rest of the team falls unless they can DPS these down in the classic example of kill them before they kill you. But it looks like the team is going to fall here yet again for Method NA. Full team wipe. Looks like JB was able to salvage it somewhat. He ended up backing off, shadow melding, and just sitting in the middle of the bridge now for the mass res. But oof, Nagura.
I mean, that's definitely an oof if you play against Method EU, especially if you look at those time trial times, right? Then this is a huge mistake that probably will just cost them the dungeon. I mean, they were already behind. But I mean, good heads up play by JB to get the Shadow Melt off, because if he wouldn't have gotten that one off, it would take even longer for him to get back and get the Masters off. So at least he got the Shadow Melt off, so that's something that they have to go for them. But Method EU, they're done with the boss now. We'll see what kind of trash they do to get the rest of the percentage here that they need before Shadow of Soul. And again, it really seems like Method EU is actually not doing anything completely flashy. So the 2 minutes difference between Method EU and Method NA in the time trials really was just, just more efficient pulls in the time trials. 13 deaths.
But I mean, that's what it could be. You know, it's hard to read into the time trials all the time, especially when they're not streaming their practice anymore. They're not streaming their time trial run. So who knows what went wrong? Maybe Method NA did have a strategy that had 2130 or something in the dungeon in their ideal situation, but it just didn't work out. Because as soon as you get on the trash on the bridge after Machimba, it is so scary. So many things can go wrong so quickly, as we saw here for Method NA, that it just didn't work out for them in time trials, and unfortunately not working out for them here. And you're absolutely right. Method U really hasn't done anything super sneaky or that we've never seen before. They've just done everything very, very clean. Well, you know, up until the bridge yet again, but up until that point, just absolutely flawless. So Method EU finishing off the last of the trash that they need before they move over to the Shadow of Zul in just a moment.
Yeah, Shadow of Zul, one of those very, very difficult mini-bosses that we keep talking about. And mini-bosses are buffed by Fortified, not by Tyrannical. So this becomes extra difficult for those teams. Most of the time, we see people are fine, especially with Sally running the Tree of Life. It definitely helps because you just have an extra cooldown, so now it should be okay. As long as they use their defenses properly, but they definitely have to be careful just because it does so much magic damage. You see the Shadow Barrage, at least behind a dot, that ticks for a lot of magic damage, so you can just see how low now it drops, and pay attention to the defensive cooldowns that they're using here.
Yeah, I will. I'll especially pay attention to that Iron Bark in the bottom row on the left side for the rest of you. I think I beat myself up more than anything else when this kind of stuff happens. Anyways, now Pops his last stand here is bolstered, of course. Now Shadow of Zul actually does melee rarely between his casts, not for a significant amount, but just, you know, as a note in the form of let's say if Necrotic were on the dungeon, you're running it on live, just a little tip there. He does finally finish off with his last stand, still holding on to that shield wall though. And as we say, Tree of Life has already been popped from Zayla, so he's likely pretty safe right now while Tree of Life is up. Once that falls off, wouldn't be shocked to see either the shield wall used, or he does have his Spell Reflect coming up in just a few seconds. A lot of damage coming in on Mirrors though, unfortunately. I think he got clipped by the pool on the stairs a few times. Now finally commits his shield wall as Shadow of Zul is entering his last 15% or so. Mirrors goes down yet again. These green rogues, they just don't make them like they used to, Nagura, but they do use the battle res on Mirrors immediately. Trank comes out of Zalia right after the res, and now just holding on to survive the last few takes from Shadow of Zul. He doesn't have access to any more personal CDs or externals. Iron Bark still has about 10 seconds left on it, but that's all she wrote. They managed to kill it off almost properly. Pearl of Mirrors died yet again, but they'll be going off in just a moment over to Dazar.
Yeah, Zalia almost reaching 80k HPS, which is almost purely single target, right? There's not much AoE going on in this fight except this extra abilities that you get, but you can outrange it or soak it if you want to, so not that much AoE. Really just fully single target, just spamming those regrowths to be able to keep now alive, and also committed almost all of their defensive cooldowns. You can see Iron Bark still available, and you also see the last stand for now, so there's something they have left for this boss in case they need it. And I just want to mention one more time that Shadow of Zul indeed was killed and gave the last 4% to make it 100% for Method use, so they reached to 100%. It's just a display graphic back here.
Yeah, King Dazar now 70%, about to enter that 60% third phase where he mounts Salah, while of course Raban is still alive. Most teams just passively cleave Raban down, don't want to lose damage on, frankly, not a very dangerous part of the fight, but the most dangerous part of the fight will be indeed this third phase coming up for them, for which they do have their Bloodlust available. Again, you know, a bit sloppier run. Obviously, Method EU will probably have a 23-something finish here, so a bit slower than they had in time trials, but you can see why they used their Bloodlust on Machimba earlier, just to make sure that they had it here on Dazar for this phase. So everything being cleaved down well here for Method EU. Method NA still working here on the bridge. They're sitting at 90% trash done, and they're grabbing the last of the trash that they need, but they haven't even killed the third boss just yet.
Yeah, they're just having problems over problems. I mean, this is something Method NA keeps talking about, that if they see a really fast time by Method EU, they just have to like increase their strategy, or like improve their strategy so much that they just feel a little bit uncomfortable doing those kind of things. Because it's always about, you know, how risky do you want to make a strategy if the success chance is not good enough, right? Because in cup play, you only have one chance. In tournament, in the time trials, you have 5 tries to get the time that you want, but in cup play you don't. So just seeing that maybe Method NA just not being able to pull off those strategies that they have to beat Method EU, and just struggling a little bit here. But in the Atal, it was the other way around, right? Method NA were the ones who had the fastest strategy and who did the min-maxing, while Method EU was struggling a little bit to get the faster strategy done.
Yeah, I mean, that's just what it is. It's going to be a really interesting third game, but so far here, history yet again starting to repeat itself as Method NA has taken the first game from Method EU, but Method EU on the way to starting that coveted reverse sweep right now, Jack.
We'll have to see on that end. And Method EU, I mean, they were the kings of King's Rest onto that one. Not quite the 21-minute run that we had been kind of hoping for out of time trials in that end, but they did do quite well. And Method NA is just not able to keep up and made some critical errors along the way, Tuttles.
Yeah, Method NA's mistakes ended up just like losing them the dungeon, while Method U's mistakes just ended up costing them about like 20 to 30 seconds here and there. Method EU ended up pulling these Guardians plus this Emissary of the Tides into the Golden Serpent, a pretty standard opener with how we actually see this dungeon done. And then they also pulled these extra animated Guardians with the minions of Zul, using that Mass Entangle in order to be able to make sure that those minions are rooted far away from the whole entire group, so that they're able to get the count from those constructs that they need. While on the side of Method NA, they're just having a few issues. They have tank death and then Lighty go down, and then this will end up causing pretty much a full wipe. As we see, tank deaths a lot of the times are actually very, very detrimental. Method EU here has a very interesting strategy with how they end up making sure that that brute continues to get distracted and knocked back, because generally whenever that brute will actually reach that pack on a Tides heavy week, he will pause his patrol and no longer move, but making sure that the brute does not get into the pack is what made Method EU able to actually pull both of those packs together, and it allowed them to alter their route in such a way that would enable them to be able to get count easily.
Most definitely. And as we look at Machimba's room, that area in particular has been very dangerous. You've seen a lot of teams do very well to be able to deal with a lot of the blobs, but also pulling the constructs in, as we saw from Method EU.
Yeah, so under most circumstances, all the embalming fluids plus the constructs is a pretty traditional pull. However, whenever we are in this bursting environment, it can actually get very dangerous. So we actually saw Method EU and Zalia using that Tree of Life there, kind of just running around healing through it. And then whenever those embalming fluids actually do start dropping pretty low, we actually see now in Zalia, and then the two rogues actually end up staying, but they have now Zalia and Mirrors running across the whole entire room into the far corner to make sure that they do not get that bursting damage. They'll end up having a few stacks just incidentally, but it is a healable amount of stacks, fortunately enough for them. So the rogues are off to the side, popping their cloak, popping their immunity to make sure that they don't get stacks of bursting as well, just dealing off with those embalming fluids. So that was actually a really good showing by Method EU.
Yeah, it goes to show how important that positioning can be as well. Grabbing everything in together, using Ursul's Vortex to make sure it all stays in that one corner, because you've seen teams have to run all the way back into the hallway, all the way back to the previous bridge to make sure they were safe. So that's just all about the control, and they've done an excellent job of that. It's also going to be putting us into a game 3, which will be on to Underrot. So the decider match to see who goes into the grand finals will be coming up right after this break. We've reached game number 3 in our upper finals between Method NA and Method EU. The series is tied up as we're ready and set to go for the Underrot.
The Underrot. You know, Naguro, we were just talking about this before the break. Historically speaking, Method NA has had many more struggles in this dungeon than Method EU. Let's see the comps here, though.
Double DK.
Double DK and
double Mistweaver.
And double Mistweaver coming out of both teams right now. So a fair bit of comp swap going on between the two teams. Now, Method EU, I know what you're going to say. Method EU with a bit of an advantage here in terms of the double res capability. If one of those DKs go down, they do have a backup. Not so much on the side of Method NA. If Lighty dies, that's it. They don't have a battle res for that pull right now. Big aggressive pull coming in here for Method EU. I believe similar to what we saw Abra do earlier, but they failed on the Harrowing Despair cast. Something that Method EU does not want to do here. Method NA with a more traditional, if you will, pull upstairs with the Matron on top of the caster.
Yeah, this is a very dangerous. It looked very easy on Method EU side, right? But this is the dangerous pull that Abra wiped on, just because there's 2 Blood Priests in there, which constantly need to be interrupted because of the healing abilities and buff abilities they have. And then you have the Mask in the middle, which casts this huge AoE damage burst that needs to be interrupted that killed Abra before. So definitely a very dangerous pull with the Matron on top as well, which buffs everybody else with haste that increases their cast time, so they cast even faster, need to be interrupted even faster. And they don't have any druids, so no Sooth. They're not able to even dispel the Matron debuff either.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately they don't have Prot Warrior. Prot Warrior is quite good at dealing with sustained hard melees to the face, especially if it's blockable. Elderly Axa here, 57%, 55% for Method EU, and they just got started over on Method NA side, who is 1% lower on Trash than Method EU, and 75% on Elderly Axa. So all in all, already at this point in the dungeon, Method EU with a superior routing. Higher percentage done Trash, more dangerous pull, but high risk, high reward, more percentage Trash done, and they're already further on the boss.
I'm actually already looking forward to the Cragmire room because both those teams are holding their bloodlust. So I'm almost certain that they're going to do an insane pull in Cragmire room, something very similar that we've seen from, I believe it was Abra that had a really insane pull earlier. They did have a wipe before that though, so they didn't win the dungeon. But with double DK, you can definitely pull off some insane stuff in that room and the bloodlust as well.
We saw Ashnine basically solo two-thirds of the room. He did 1.4 million damage with double Unholy DK. Could we see the entire room pulled with the boss?
I don't think, can you even?
Do the legends tell such a tale? I guess we'll find out here from Method in just a moment that it's already killed. Elderly Accent is starting to head over into Cragmire's room right now, grabbing the Ooey Gooeys at the beginning. Double Lasher pulled in as well. I guess a lot of what would be scary with doing a pull of that size is really just the danger of Decaying Mind going out. They only have one Dispel, probably part of the reason they opted to bring the Mistweaver, but pretty substantial pull, about the same size pull as we saw here from Abra. Huge damage about to rocket up right now for the Unholy DKs. Mirror's dropping quite low, but no problem as Fragments get us both DKs getting over a mill right now. And just as I finish this sentence, the trash is dead. Oh my god.
Where did it go? I just blinked and it was gone. That was just insane. Look at the damage of both those DKs. Sally actually beating Gingy.
They still have 15 seconds of Bloodlust running.
Gingy went AFK. He just got himself a coffee while the DKs were finishing off the trash. Just insane display. As you can see, Method and A having a lot of trouble. Shakib going down, Lighty going down. It might just be a full team with 2 DPS missing. They can't rest anyone. They don't have the rest.
No, they don't. And in this situation, it was a mistake for them not to be playing 2 yellow DKs instead of just 1. So that's really what bailed Method EU out of this situation with that massive pull. Full wipe coming in here for Method and A. And what I wanted to say at the beginning, before we were both in shock and awe of the comp swaps, was really just that traditionally, historically, between these two teams on Underrot, not even facing each other, but just Underrot in general, including even last season, Method and A has had a lot more issues in Cragmire's room than Method EU. And history once again repeating itself here as Method and A has a full team wipe in Cragmire's room there. Method EU sitting at a pretty 45%, about to be 50 or 48, excuse me, as they get ready to pull Cragmire.
Yeah, and one more thing to note is that Gingy is, I mean, we don't see the racial, but I assume he's playing human because he does not have the stone form, he does not have the Night Elf Shadow Melt. So him being human is something we've seen from Pain for Femme, which they used to do those kind of pulls to get the Lasher debuff off of them. Now, something that Method and A does not do, they have both their rogues play stone form, so both of them are rogues, and the rest of the team is Night Elf. So they don't have this ability. Now, of course, your healer can dispel it, but if you get multiple of them off, the dispel does have an 8-second cooldown, so just having this extra human racial just helps out for these kind of pulls.
Yeah, and what is it? Detox, I think, on a monk is the dispel name. So just like any other healer or any dispel in the game, it's an 8-second cooldown indeed. So just trying to play on the side of safety for Method EU with their specific racial selections. Zalia going just a bit low there. A lot of damage coming in from that Swarmer. They do manage to kill it off before any disaster strikes as Method 62% on trash pulls Cragmire and gets started on the second boss here. 96% on that boss. They just started. Yoda going down, unfortunately, on the side of Method, and they putting them down up to 8 deaths. Excuse me, Shakib goes down as well. He's the one who puts them up to 8 deaths right now as they try to finish off the rest of this pack. They're still holding on to their Bloodlust as they're just trusting that the rest can get it killed. So not their Bloodlust, excuse me, their Battle Res. They're holding on to their Battle Res. They're just trusting that Lighty can carry the rest of the damage, and then they just have a general mass res after this. But once again, a lot of time loss. I mean, finishing the rest of that pack with 2 of your DPS done, not to mention the res that needs to come right after this.
Yeah, just so much trouble in this Cragmire room. We keep talking about it, but Method and A is just a team that struggles so much in this area. And as you said, just not having those 2 DKs, being able to finish those packs and this huge pull so much faster definitely cost them here. And maybe also, you know, some divas going through, not having the human racials. Just in general, a bunch of problems. Nerf tank dropping really low again as they jump into this Lasher pull. And you can see the Emissary of Tide right here. Now, why we keep talking about this dispelling and the human racial is because the Emissary of Tides, it's no way to interrupt those Lasher casts, so they will just go through. You can out-heal them as a healer, but it takes way longer than dispelling it, right? So you do not want to have your DPS down forever.
Cragmire here to 25% for Method EU. Curious to see if they're going to be, I mean, knowing them, they're likely going to be pretty aggressive with the Defiler pull on top of Sancho on the 3rd boss. We'll see exactly what they do when they get there, but Method and I mean, they're just so behind right now. They have 25% trash. That even started on Cragmire, which is falling shortly here for Method EU. They have 8 deaths on the board. They still have their battle res, so I suppose that's one small silver lining to this otherwise pretty disastrous situation.
Yeah, and Method EU, they're about to down Cragmire here. It is a 45 setting, so Cragmire, the last 8% should not take a long time at all. And then, yeah, so in between Cragmire and Sancha, we've seen some dangerous pulls happen before, specifically out of Abra and Pain for Femme. And there's lots of different things you can do, because there's a lot of trash available. There's a bunch of danger noodles, there's a bunch of guardians. So you can pick and choose whatever you want to do here. A very open dungeon when it comes to trash percentage. So we'll see what those teams do. But it's a teaming environment, so you do have to kill a little bit more trash than you usually have.
So instead of using the Math Stealth from Fragments, they opted to actually pull that noodle along with the Enchanted Emissary and just deal the Enchanted Emissary on the side to get the percentage trash count from her. And then later on, they will just, you know, probably drop combat with the noodle. I mean, the thing is, that's why they're playing Lines, because, you know, we talk about Arcane Torrent for these Guardians instead. As long as you outrange the Death Bolt from the Hazard Spaghetti, then it doesn't really matter. It's okay if you pull one. It'll just keep you in combat, much like a Void Emissary would if you pull it and then just run away from it. So Method EU here sitting at 72% trash as they flip sides of this alley, if you will, leading down, or tunnel leading down to the boss right now. It looks like Method NA nothing but more trouble here as they have another full team wipe, putting them up to 14 deaths, and they also burned the remaining battlers trying to save that.
Yeah, insane amount of travel on Method NA's side as Method EU did engage Vol'kaal as Sancha. Now, this seems like a very similar strategy than what we've seen from Pain for Femme. Both of the Emissary of Tides have been dragged towards Sancha, so now they're just going to cleave them down. Not a problem at all. This boss does do a lot of tank damage, actually, with the Shockwave. So on top of the Emissaries, a little bit of trouble for now, as you can see him drop a little bit low, but it is fortified after all, so no increased damage from the boss here. And then once those Emissary of Tides are down, they're probably going to pull those Defilers on top that you can see there, and then they probably will kill the Death Speaker afterwards, just because Defilers and Death Speakers at the same time, there's just too many abilities to interrupt.
Yeah, too many. I mean, you need 4 interrupts for 2 Defilers, and according to my math, that's 2 interrupts per Defiler. And if you throw in the Death Speaker on top of that, the Death Speaker also casts Raise Dead, so that's a 5th interrupt that you just don't have here, because I think the only hero that is an interrupt is that Resto Shaman, right? Yeah. I mean, I don't even know what that looks like in an MDI setting. I don't think we've ever seen one, so that's just not an option for the team. So they're dedicating 2 interrupts, their 4 interrupts, excuse me, to the 2 Defilers, Method NA, Yoda going down. Every time I look over at Method NA, there's some combination of Cragmire Room plus somebody dying. It's just not working out for them. Just a lot of sloppy play. That's not even a hugely dangerous pull right now coming out of them, but Yoda unfortunately does go down yet again. So 15 deaths on the board for them. They do have a battle res coming up soon as Vol'kaal Zancha hits 50% here for Method EU. And you know, I just spent about 20 minutes monologuing interrupts on the Defilers, and they let one leak. And
even 2?
2. So Withering Curse. Withering Curse decreases your damage done by 2% per stack, and it stacks. So is that the end of the world that they got a 10-second debuff of 2% damage done? No, but you hate to see it, kind of thing.
They actually had 2 Shadow Bolt volleys go off as well on top of that. So I'm not it might have been intended too, because they're like, you know what, the Shadow Bolt volley is not going to kill us, and we don't have an interrupt right now. Let's rather interrupt the other ability, and Sally is just going to heal it away. Maybe that is something that they actually calculated. Now we actually saw a really good revival here as well. So they didn't soak the mushrooms on purpose. It wasn't a mistake or anything like that. They planned the revival, which does not only do a huge burst of healing, but it also dispels all the diseases of the players.
Yeah, we can see the pre-AMS there in the background from Mears as he runs through a few of the mushrooms just to help soak some of the area and make it safe for the next festering harvest cast, which is right now. Vol'kaal Zancha is at 5% HP. Just a bit of damage on the group here, but no problem as most of the mushrooms were eaten. Couple of extra stacks in on Frag and Mears as they got hit by the circles from the spores. And that's about it. Vol'kaal Zancha, the fun guy, drops over, and they get ready to head over to the final Guardian pack with the Danger Noodle and likely the Defiler. Either the Defiler or the Corruptor. We've seen both strategies happen from the 2 teams, but pretty sizable trash pull coming in here in a moment.
Yeah, so they don't have their Bloodlust available yet, meaning they probably, they have to use it at the last boss, I assume, because they're just so incredibly fast. They're 11 minutes into the dungeon, they're already on their way to the last boss, 81% trash, and yeah, they do this exact pull, but without the Danger Noodle. So another thing actually they just, oh yeah, they're engaging it right now, so they pull it after all. They probably just wanted to deal with the Emissary of Tides first.
They nuked down first.
Yeah, so they were just like spamming the Emissary of Tides first, which doesn't really matter for the Guardians too much because the casts are not that important to interrupt. And now they engage the Defiler plus the Danger Noodle because those casts actually are important and they need to be interrupted.
They do need to be interrupted, and they should have enough interrupts. Once again, 4 interrupts required amongst the Head and the Defiler here, and they have no problem doing that this time as they're at 90% and about to finish the Defiler, which will take them to 93 indeed. So the only things they have left in the dungeon right now are actually the 2 Corruptors at the door here, plus the Emissary of Tides on top of it. That should be the remaining 7% that they need before they hit the 100, and as a result, the webbing, or the web door, if you will, opens up and reveals the pathway to the final boss. Method NA just starting on Cragmire not long ago, so they're at 82% on Cragmire, 15 deaths on the board, and they've tried to be a bit more aggressive here by combining some of the trash with the boss.
Yeah, it looks like, I mean, when Method EU reaches the last boss, Method NA is probably going to still be on Cragmire, so it seems like they're insanely far ahead on Method EU, which they are. But if you just look at the time, those 2 teams are just so fast at the dungeons. They're just, the amount of speed they have to just go through these dungeons is insane. So whenever you make those kind of mistakes that Method NA does, then at some point Method EU is going to be at the end of the dungeon all of a sudden within a span of 2 minutes, right? So Method NA just struggling way too much in this dungeon in general. 15 deaths at this point. It's really not their dungeon.
No, not their dungeon, and it's really weird. I mean, they started the Atal so well, so flawless, and then we went to King's Rest, and they had, you know, some issues, not as bad as this one, and this one just went completely catastrophic. So, I mean, you know, you can guess a million different things. You know, maybe they're a bit tilted, maybe it just got in their head and it affected their play, or maybe it was just bad luck and it just didn't work out for them today. Whatever it may be. Well, I don't know about bad luck. I mean, there's only so much luck that goes into this, but something affected their play after Dungeon 1, perhaps around the time the bridge on King's Rest took over, and it just kind of spiraled or seemed to have snowballed out of control for their Method EU having a actually literally perfect run here in Underrot. Perfect percentage, no deaths, everything just dying so quickly with this double DK comp, and they head over and start up on Unbound Abomination.
Yeah, so now they actually are in the last boss while Method NA is still fighting on Cragmire. Unfortunately, Method NA using that Bloodlust here on the pool, and the Bloodlust here is actually very beneficial for the double DK comp because both of them do have their army ready. They have all of their cooldowns, and look at the amount of damage Mirrors is doing here. The burst DPS you can do on single target as a unholy DK. We've been talking about single target DPS not being the greatest for DK, but with those cooldowns being ready and having Bloodlust on top, you just do huge amount of burst damage. So this is why you see these insane numbers coming out of both Mirrors and Frag here. Of course, Rogue doing a lot of damage too, but he's nowhere near that burst from Mirrors. And this boss does work a little bit differently. That's why the HP is not moving as you think it is. It's the energy bar that you have to pay attention to.
Yeah, the energy bar is just going up so fast right now. They've already dealt with 2 waves of the Blood Visages, and they're just about to spawn the last one as soon as that red resource bar at the bottom of the Unbound Abomination bar goes off. Method NA has finished off Cragmire, and they're still dealing with a bit of the trash leading to Vol'kaal or Zancha, but what a story here right now for Method EU as Zalia ends up proccing his staff at the very end of the dungeon. Jack looking very gleefully over at me. Zalia absolutely destroying the padding. Yeah, I mean, there's all the spores, but I mean, Jack, yes, aside from the staff, history repeats itself. Reverse sweep from Method EU, and I mean, that dungeon was flawless.
That was super fast.
Flawless. Flawless.
Yes.
Flawless.
But they were padding.
Dr. J would be proud, right?
Well, I was gonna... Oh my goodness, out of that one. Yeah, I love how he procs his staff at the very end of it. I thought he was going to start using it on, for example, like the skeleton pack beforehand or something like that, but incredible run here by Method EU to get that reverse sweep.
Yeah, so sometimes you just got to pad on the damage meter on the end of dungeon for details, but you actually did see both Method NA and Method EU were neck and neck coming into the Cragmire room. They both did a similarly sized pull, but Method NA just had some issues with explosives and people dying, and then they ended up having a full team wipe, which pretty much spelled the end for them. Method EU really stepped it up with that huge pull that we actually did see in the front half of Cragmire's room. Then they just downed Cragmire, did Vol'kaal or Zancha with like the double tides with that Ring of Peace, utilizing it to separate out that tides from the pack, and then pulling in the Defilers and the Death Speaker as that got grouped up. And then, of course, at the end of the dungeon, Unbound Abomination was just a pretty clean burn for Method EU. Xaylia doing 65k DPS, beating both of his DKs and showing why he is, in fact, the best.
That was all in the spores. That was all
He's top of the meter.
spores.
This is the best healer I've ever seen in my life. How do you do that much
He's
damage?
top of the meter.
All that matters.
Let's look at the big damage, the big effective damage, though, that he was doing in Cragmire's room. That pull
Yes,
is incredible.
So this pull is really showing the power of double Unholy Death Knight here. So they're grouping up all of these mobs. You actually see now running around with his Sky Step Potion. You actually see them having to be very careful about explosives. Gingy running around making sure that all of those explosives are getting dealt with. And then once the Unholy Death Knights drop their Death and Decay, they'll end up popping like AMS and Icebound Fortitude to make sure they can't get stunned. And then right at this point, they're both doing over 1 million DPS. Xaylia is doing 200k HPS and almost 200k DPS, while Gingy is sitting there making sure that all the explosives are getting killed. So he's actually doing his job. The pack instantly gets melted, even though it is a very, very dangerous pull. And Method EU gets 29% of their count from that one pull.
And they still have another 15-20 seconds, for example, on Bloodlust available to them. But I love being able to show off Way of the Crane. That's one of the new PvP, it's one of the new essences that gives you a PvP talent, gives you that Way of the Crane and the damage into healing burst. So he's running with 3 secret infusions, which starts giving you more secondary stats. So we saw there is he popped his Thunder Focus T, he pops Way of the Crane, he instantly uses his Rising Sun kick, procs that massive versatility buff, and then is just spinning to win the entire time with probably like 20-30% versatility and Bloodlust on top of it. It was absurdly good damage on, and a lot of healing that you could pop out as well. So Method EU is going to be going on into that grand finals off the back of that win. Method NA, again, dropping down into the lower finals is where we've constantly kind of been seeing them drop down to, and then, as you mentioned, Sloot, history's kind of repeating itself here.